Everyone in that room thought they were celebrating my biggest achievement, but within seconds, it turned into a public accusation that could have destroyed my entire life. My sister-in-law stood up, looked me in the eye, and told everyone my degree was fake, that I had cheated, that I was a fraud. And the worst part? She thought I had no idea what she'd been doing behind my back. She was wrong, because 3 days earlier, I had already found everything. And that night, I was ready. My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 31 years old, and I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for 5 years. Last month, we hosted a small graduation dinner at our home. It was meant to celebrate something I had spent 3 years fighting for, my master's degree. 3 years of balancing a full-time job, late nights at the kitchen table, and weekends that disappeared into deadlines. That night was supposed to be perfect. The house felt warm and alive. I had spent 2 full days preparing, cleaning every corner, decorating the patio with soft string lights, cooking dishes I knew everyone loved. Inside, the dining table was set with our special occasion plates, the ones we almost never used. In the living room, a handmade banner stretched across the wall. "Congratulations, Dr. Nora." My friend Pauline had made it herself. It hung slightly crooked, but somehow that made it feel even more real. Guests started arriving with flowers, wine, laughter. My mother moved around the room, proudly telling anyone who would listen how hard I had worked. Daniel stood near the kitchen, joking with his friends, catching my eye every few minutes and smiling like he couldn't believe this moment was finally here. From the outside, everything looked exactly the way I had imagined. But not everyone was celebrating. Simone, Daniel's sister, had been quiet since the moment she walked in. Not a peaceful quiet, not the kind that fades into the background. This was different. It was the kind of silence that feels loaded, like someone holding on to something sharp, waiting for the perfect moment to let it cut. She barely hugged me when she arrived, just a quick touch, no warmth, and then she drifted along the edges of every conversation, never fully joining in. But she kept watching me. Every time I looked up, I'd catch her staring, and every time, she'd look away just a second too late. Simone and I had never been close, not really. From the very beginning, she made it clear, quietly, carefully, that she didn't approve of me. Never directly. That was never her style. It was always something subtle, a comment, a tone, a look. And that night, something about her felt different, like she wasn't just judging me anymore. She was waiting. About an hour into the evening, everyone slowly gathered in the living room. My mother suggested we do the toast before dinner, worried the food might get cold. People settled in, glasses in hand, the soft hum of conversation fading into anticipation. Daniel stepped forward. He slipped his arm around me, pulling me gently to his side, and began to speak. At first, his voice was steady, but as he continued, it softened. He talked about the nights he'd wake up and find me still studying at the kitchen table, long after midnight, about the weekends I gave up without complaining, about the way I carried everything, work, school, life, without ever asking for sympathy. He said he was proud of me, not just for the degree, but for the person I was. By the time he finished, a few people were wiping their eyes. Even I had to blink quickly to keep mine clear. Someone let out a playful whistle from the back, and the room filled with applause. I laughed softly and leaned into Daniel for just a second, letting myself feel it, the pride, the relief, the moment I had been working toward for years. And then Simone spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I'd like to say something too. The room shifted. A few people turned toward her, expecting another toast. Daniel hesitated, a faint crease forming between his brows, but then he nodded. "Go ahead." Simone placed her wine glass down with careful precision. She smoothed the front of her blouse, composed, controlled. Then she looked me directly at me. She said she had been sitting with something for a while, that as family she felt a responsibility to be honest. The air changed instantly. Smiles faded, conversations died mid-breath. She said she had heard things from someone in my program about my thesis, about whether it was really my own work. She never used the words cheating or fraud. She didn't need to. The implications spread through the room like cold smoke. Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. I saw my mother freeze, her hand suspended halfway to the breadbasket. Pauline's face drained of color near the banner she had made for me. Daniel's arm slowly slipped from my shoulder. He looked at me. Nora? And in that moment, everyone was waiting for me to break, to defend myself, to fall apart. But instead, I smiled. Simone blinked, just once, but it was enough. That wasn't the reaction she had been expecting. She had planned this carefully, the timing, the setting, the audience. She thought I would panic, that I'd start explaining too quickly, stumble over my words, maybe even cry. And in front of a room full of people, that would have been enough to make me look guilty. That's what she was counting on. But I didn't give her that, because 3 days earlier, I had already discovered what she'd been doing behind my back. She was wrong. And standing there in my living room, with the crooked banner behind me and dinner getting cold in the kitchen, I realized something very clearly. This wasn't her moment. It was mine. I kept my voice calm, steady. I said I appreciated Simone for looking out for the family. A few people shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. Simone's expression tightened, just slightly, the first crack in her composure. I continued. I said accusations like that are serious, that they deserved more than whispers and implications. They deserved facts. Then I turned to Daniel. Can you hand me your laptop? There was a pause, just a second too long. Daniel looked at me, searching my face for something, maybe reassurance, maybe answers. But then, without saying anything, he reached over to the side table, picked up his laptop, and handed it to me. I walked to the television, the same one we used for movie nights. I plugged in the HDMI cable. The screen flickered and then mirrored perfectly. The room went completely silent. No one moved. Simone crossed her arms, a small, controlled smile forming on her lips again. I'm not sure what you think this is going to prove, she said coolly, but it doesn't change what I've heard. I looked at her. I understand, I said. Then I turned back to the screen. I just think everyone deserves the full picture. I opened the first document, a time-stamped submission record from my university. Dates, revisions, faculty approvals, advisor sign-offs, final authorization from the department chair. Every step of my thesis, documented, verified, real. And at the bottom, plagiarism scan results, 0% flagged. I stepped slightly to the side so everyone could see. A few guests leaned forward. Someone whispered quietly, "That looks official." Simone didn't move, but something in her eyes shifted. Simone's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened just enough for me to notice. She tilted her head slightly, as if unimpressed. "Documents can be manipulated," she said smoothly. "That's not really the issue." Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it now, a faint edge. She wasn't as comfortable as she had been a minute ago. She shifted her weight and continued, "The concern isn't the submission record, it's the content of the thesis itself." A few people glanced at each other, unsure. I nodded slowly, like I was considering her point. "That makes sense," I said. "So this person you heard from," I let the sentence hang for just a moment. "Who are they?" There it was, the first real pause. It was brief, barely a second, but in a silent room, it echoed. Simone's fingers tightened slightly against her arms. "They asked me to keep their name private," she replied. Of course they did. I gave a small, understanding nod. "I see." And then I smiled again. "Actually, that helps." This time, she didn't hide the reaction fast enough. Just a flicker, confusion. I turned back to the screen and clicked the next file. An email chain appeared, time-stamped, dated. 6 weeks earlier. At first, people leaned in casually, then closer, because the names were visible. The sender, Timothy Walsh, a graduate student from my department. Not someone I knew well, just a face from an old seminar, but the recipient. That made the room shift. It was Simone, her personal email address displayed clearly at the top. A murmur spread quietly through the room. I stepped aside again, letting everyone read. At first glance, it didn't look like what Simone had described. There was no mention of academic concerns, no whistleblowing, no integrity, just one thing: money. The email stretched across 3 weeks, and the more people read, the quieter the room became. Timothy hadn't reached out as some concerned classmate. He had approached Simone through LinkedIn first. I pulled that message up too, presenting himself as someone with insider knowledge. But he